Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dream Data.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dream Data employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations.
social selling maybe.
Hello and welcome everybody to today's Attributed session. Today with me, I have somebody who actually knows what she's talking about. She's not a self-trained operator, a self-trained marketer like me, just kind of winging it day by day. But we actually have a true marketing scientist with us today. She's named Jenni Romaniuk. I hope I got it right, Jenni. What I'm really excited about talking about with you today, Jenni, is that you've been spending like decades researching marketing, researching how brands grow, how buyers make decisions, and instead of my own gut feeling, you can actually validate what does science really say. You've authored 3 books, as far as I know: Better Brand Health, Building Distinct Brand Assets, and How Brands Grow Part 2. And I'm just really excited to kind of dig into all of your experience about these things. And most importantly, getting to understand how we can actually make our brands remembered in this very, very busy, and particular in our niche, this tech market of tools where everybody can use AI tools and make everything sound similar. So, Jenni, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. But for those who've never heard about you before, read your books or anything like that, what is the kind of introduction to yourself and your work that you normally would give?
Hello. Yes. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, my name's Jenni Romaniuk, and I'm a research professor and a international director at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute for Marketing Science. We're based at Adelaide University, the newly formed Adelaide University. And basically, I describe my research has 3 parts. So I'm a researcher. I go out, I try to find questions, try to find answers to those questions. And basically, it boils down to how the stuff in people's heads influences the choices they make, how marketing activity influences the stuff in people's heads, and how do we measure that in a way that gives us as accurate as possible view of what's going on in people's heads, given the limitations of asking people questions to try to get answers.
Fantastic. And how did you get into this world, Jenni? Was there some kind of moment or some occasions that kind of led you down this rabbit hole?
I've always liked solving problems. It's one of my things. I'm one of those. You know how they always talk about people who, if you tell them their problem, you're supposed to listen, and they think, no, that's not me. You don't come to me to listen. You come to me if you want a solution to something. Because I'm immediately, as soon as you tell me your problem, I'm really going, well, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? What about this? What about that? Which of course drives some of my friends crazy, but that's just the way I am. And I got lucky in that a few things fell into place that kind of put me on this path. It was no great deliberate plan. It just ended up being this way. And so, it's just I mean, I never thought I would still be living in Adelaide, and I never thought I would be a professor at a university. But I always thought I would find something interesting to do where I could have fun answering questions that matter. And that's what I would luckily found.
That's great. And Jenni, I think your Ehrenberg Bass Institute probably deserves a little bit of a talk up, because is it fair to say it's probably the leading marketing science university in the world?
I would consider it so. I mean, there are individual researchers working around, but we're the largest group of people who work together. That allows us to look across the wider range of marketing and not just focus on advertising or loyalty or just one part of the marketing puzzle. And part of that, being able to pull all those things together, is really what's been enabled us to make some really great discoveries.
Mm. And do you only do science, or do you also like teach people that have jobs or like enterprise jobs about how to do marketing as well?
Yeah, I mean, we are part of Adelaide University, which has a large undergraduate program in marketing, as well as postgraduate programs that involve some of it in marketing, some involve others. We have researchers that come through our institute. Some of them do masters by research. So basically, they get a master's degree, but they get on the ground training on how to think like a researcher, how to be a researcher, that then they go out into industry jobs and work as brand managers and things like that in different organizations around the world. We also do executive training. We have our How Brands Grow for Executives, which is an intensive 4-day session in a particular location. One's coming up actually in Bordeaux in June. And then we have one in Boston and also in Singapore. And those are when you really get to, dive in, get your hands dirty with your brands and leading researchers, including Byron, to go through and actually work out what are the pain points, what are the decisions you need to make, and how to make those decisions to grow your brands. So we do a lot of, we discover and we disseminate, and that dissemination takes a wide variety of forms.
Cool. I just felt like that was a fair mention because it's such a great opportunity for people listening to educate themselves further in the marketing world. If we start from the beginning, or like if you were to explain me kind of how does a brand and a B2B brand get to be remembered, because all of us actually want to be remembered. So when buyers start making lists of companies or vendors that they need to speak with, they typically only remember one or two or three brands or something like that. So what is the kind of like in how do you get to that position in simple terms that buyers or your ideal customers actually remembers your brand instead of another brand?
Yeah, well, I mean, so one thing to be clear is that often we remember multiple things at once. So there's a little bit of a myopathy where people constantly focus on got to be top of mind. Actually, you don't have to be the first one retrieved. You just have to be retrieved. Because if people can hold 2, 3, 4 things in their brain, and that's fewer than everything they know. And as long as you're one of them, it didn't matter if you came out first or you came out fourth, you're still
Okay.
part of those brands being thought of. But that's a big challenge, and to understand how to give yourself the best chance of being that, we really need to understand how we build memories. And that is through co-presentation of what people are using to retrieve the brand name and our brand, and continually doing that to keep it fresh, because memories don't stay static. It's not like you build it and then it's there and it's you come back in 2 years' time and it will still be there. No, if we don't use our memories, they're not refreshed. They decay over
Yeah.
time. But the good news is once we've established a link in memory, it's easier to refresh it. We don't have to work as hard to do that. But we do have to do the work to do it.
Mm.
So in order to be remembered, you have to understand what people are using to retrieve brands from their brain. And you have to position your brand so that you are behind the many different things people can use to retrieve brands from their brain. And you need to keep doing that over the long term, so that knowing that any individual goes in and out of the market, because they come in at the time when they're about to buy and then they leave after they've bought and then they come back in again later. And you've got to keep that up. Yeah.
That's a good start. That's a good start. So I guess we can break it into kind of how do you enter into people's memory, and then afterwards, how do you then
Okay.
kind of keep it boiling? I know you talk about like category entry point. Is that related to this?
Yeah. So they're the cues that people use, because often we think of a category buyer as like constantly on.
Hmm.
But they're not. Even for packaged goods we use a lot, we're not buying them all the time.
No, no.
We're living our lives and then we come into a category and go out. And that's true for B2B buyers as well. even though you might be head of procurement for photocopier machines, that's not what you're not spending all your day out there buying photocopier machines. You've probably got other things you're also buying. You've got other things you're doing in your job, etc. And so we have to recognize that people come into that state of being a category buyer. And when they do, the thoughts that they have shape what basically gets plucked out of their memory as useful information at this time. Because our brain doesn't want to overload us with stuff. It just wants to, if it wants to get stuff done. We don't like thinking. We do sometimes, but most of the time we don't like it. We want to get to, we've made the decision and we're moving on from that.
Yeah.
And so our brain tries to be efficient and go, oh, if that's what you're looking for, then blah, 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 that'll do. And most of the time, unless those, say, 3 options are none of them are going to work, we go from there.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking as a marketer, kind of how do I then be one of those, let's say, 3 brands that this in like in our world it might be a VP of marketing that they actually remember our product when they have to solve problems around kind of the ROI of marketing. Kind of how do I then manipulate the buyer's world that it's my brand that they remember as they enter into this category?
Well, you've got to get out there and reach them, and with something that is likely to change their memories in your favor. Now, there's a whole range of different tools you can use to reach. Everything from mass advertising, social media, advertise on LinkedIn. There's a whole range of different things you can do. You can sponsor things, all sorts of activities and events. The question is, what is the best way to reach the people you need to reach, but also change the memories in the way you need to change them? Because not everything is equal in how much control you have over it and your capacity to use it to tell the story you want to tell, build the message you want to build. And so that's where the kind of the art and the science come together, in that the science tells us what to do, but there is something of an art of how do you do it in a way that is compelling in people's brains.
Yeah. What does if we start with the bucket of what does the science tell us we need to do? What is the toolbox there, or what are the buttons we need to be pushing?
Well, the first thing is, reach is important, because reach gives a scale for any marketing activity. Low reach means even if you're really, really, really successful, you've not moved the needle much. It's like you win the battle but lose the war, because that effort you spent on that low reach activity could have been spent probably on a bigger reach activity. So always look at reach first of what your potential is, because that's basically setting the upper limit of success for you.
And by reach, that's tangibly, that is the market you're addressing, and how many of these people are you getting in front of?
Yeah, and thinking about it from a budget unit perspective. So rather than people thinking about it from a single organization, you might have multiple budget holders within an organization. They are individual brains that you want to influence. So count brains, not companies. Even within a company, there might be 2 decision makers. That's 2 brains you want to influence.
Yeah.
So you want to reach both of them, not just one of them, because it's much better if both of them go, oh, hey, I thought of this company. Yes, so did I. Than if just one of them does and the other's like, oh, who are they? And then has to try to do some things there.
Yeah, this is a point I've heard multiple times from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. What is what is kind of the science behind that point? That some people would kind of, without knowing the science in B2B, saying, no, it's better to get in front of that same person 50 times rather than getting in front of 50 people one time.
Well, I would say actually it's less science, more maths. Maths is whether you argue whether maths is a science, but it's actually just maths, because the incremental return a small group of people can give doesn't compare to even a lower return, but from a bigger group of people. Now, Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the fact in B2B, sometimes you might only have, say, 7 buyers in the world in terms of companies. But this is why it's important to not think of it as companies, but think of it as brains. Because within those 7 companies, there's probably multiple brains that you want to get out there and do. Now, if you just plan on one, there are a few things we can predict in life, and we can never predict when someone is open to a new supplier, because that can happen outside of our control. Now, yeah, sometimes people might want to change because a company has not delivered on what they're supposed to deliver and they're disappointed, they want something else. But actually, most of the time when businesses switch, it's actually due to nothing the company did, but just changes within the organization, changes within the market, things that you can't control. So if you're constantly trying to hold on to the customers you've got and focus on a very narrow group, you're going to lose out in the long run. And we know this from some research that's been done by some of my colleagues that looked at in B2B markets how identify brands that grew and declined with longitudinal data. So that's data from the same group of people over a long period of time. And what they found is that growing brands still lost customers, and they lost customers at a predictable rate.
What does
The
that mean?
thing that made them grow is they acquired more customers than they lost. Similarly, declining brands lost customers and pretty much lost it at the rate that they should. Wasn't like everybody just left them, but what they didn't do was acquire enough customers to replace the ones that they'd lost.
Yeah.
And so this is where we go reach and getting out, because you can't predict out of all of the potential new customers out there, which one is going to be over the line and take you up this quarter, this year, whatever. But the groundwork you do on all of the other customers isn't lost. And this is the idea put forward by my colleague John Dawes, the 95-5 rule. And that, yes, a small amount of your marketing is about converting the 5% that are in the market, but a big amount of it should be getting everything all set up. So the 95 who are not in the market, when they do come in the market, you're ahead of the game in terms of your chance of being thought of and therefore bought.
Yeah, and I can think of multiple reasons why this reach over being specific might work better. Like you pitch 10 people your product, and some of them gets it, but some don't. And if you were unlucky and selected those that don't get it, then you spend all your marketing money just on those people.
And the scary part is often it's nothing to do with the quality of your pitch. It's actually where they're at right now. And so you have to understand that you can deliver the best pitch in the world, and they just might not be, this is the wrong time for them.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean it's totally useless, because it might be the right time for them next year. And they might go, oh God, I remember Stephanie did that pitch. That was really good. We should get them back in and see what's been happening.
Yeah.
That sort of thing happens, but you've just got to give yourself the best chance of it. And it's probabilities. I suppose it depends. If you play roulette, are you a black and red type of person, or do you put it all on number 27?
Yeah. Wonderful. I'll pull in a question now because we're getting them as we speak. So Emily is saying this: is it proven that customers always retrieve brands from memory and make mental lists rather than searching and browsing as the first behavior for solving problems?
The word proven, I think, it's like, because I mean, I could, if I said yes, someone goes, but I just did that, and so you're wrong. So it's sort of stuff. A lot of the times, the first search engine we go to is our brain, simply because it's the easiest one for us to do. And even then, we then go, because we typically only then go further, either to explore the ideas we've already thought of. So, I thought of this brand. I'll just go check, do they have the floor cleaner I'm looking for, or something like that? Or if I have nothing in my brain about it, then I might go and search. But then, even then, when the search or the AI gives me options, my knowledge of those options will determine what I click on and what I don't.
Mm.
So information we build up in memory is always useful, but sometimes it might be useful in a different way, at different points of the retrieval and planning process.
Wonderful. So if we talk about that mental list, which is, so first of all, we established it's much better to reach more potential buyers than going super deep on just a few. Now, once we try to go for these many buyers, potential buyers, what are the kind of building blocks or concepts that we as marketers need to understand? I know one of the things that is top of mind for me is these distinct brand assets. Is that a correct place to think about those as we kind of want to stay on that mental list?
I would put distinct brand assets. Distinctive assets are they have they have one sort of uber role and then two kind of sub roles within that. So their main
Mm.
role is to trigger the brand. And there's two times where that is really important for us. Firstly, in any piece of communication we put out there,
Mm.
we want to make sure that people know it was from us and not from our competitor or not from anybody. And what happens is if we don't have a brand to anchor that information, often it just doesn't get processed. It goes over people's heads. Occasionally people go, yeah, I saw an ad about, refinancing the business, but God, I can't remember who it was. And then they just, we'll go from there. The second time when distinctive assets are useful are being able to find and buy in cluttered environments. So that might be in an online marketplace. It might be at a trade show, for example, where, you're looking around trying to, look at options of where should you go and see what they've got. This is where distinctive assets in themselves help you find the brand that you're looking for at that point in time.
So so distinct assets are more like in a recall effect that we like once they know us. There's
Yeah.
some things that if they just see, for example, we've been working with this peculiar blue for 6 or 7 years or something like that. So I think about that as one of our assets. That if that for our buyers, if that's there, then they don't need a lot of explanations. They know we're the center of it. But
Yeah,
Jenny,
well,
how
it's like
would
we
you?
have our owl.
Yeah, like how would you like? Could you name kind of somewhat like 5 classic distinct brand assets that just for people who have not read the books about it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's all sorts of different types of assets out there. So you can have colors and color combinations. And so, for example, IBM and blue is one that's often quite
Mm,
well known. Or if you think about the colors that Google uses in combination.
yeah.
Um, you can have faces and they can be celebrities, spokespeople, or characters. So Salesforce Astro Boy is an example of that. You can have shapes. And so that, for example, if you take HSBC and their diamond shape
Mm,
that they utilize. And then there's assets in advertising that are story-based assets. So they can be advertising moments, components, or styles. So if you think of Progressive insurance company in the US, they have a very specific style of white in terms of their advertising there. So there's a whole range of sensory things. There's also audio, and there's also taste, touch, and smell.
mm,
Those latter ones tend to be more sparingly employed because they require the brand and the consumer to be in the same physical place,
mm,
whereas our audio and visual ones can be communicated through a wide range of mediums.
yeah.
So there's basically anything sensory can be a distinctive asset, But your challenge is to just make sure that it's something that is owned by you.
Yeah, and I think if we are to kind of, so those are the assets, and then kind of why do you need these assets? And I think the point here I'm trying to make is that if if you constantly change what you do, people have no chance of remembering your brand. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, so if you decide you don't want to stick to the same thing and you want to chop and change your visual identity all the time, then you only really have one asset, and that's your brand name.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, if you're really strong in the use of your brand name, great. That is that's your ultimate distinctive asset. That's the thing that's trademarked, and that's the job. Unfortunately, there are some environments where maybe the brand name isn't the best tool because there might be like lots of words around, and so it doesn't cut through as much as what an image would. And so by having variety in your branding, it allows you to tap into all the different senses and different ways our brains work and process information. But the benefit of that, you only get the benefit of that if you're willing to undertake the cost and the work of it, of building up and sticking consistently. And so that's why actually having a plan of what your distinctive assets are, and not just what they are now, but where you want them to be. And so I talk about distinctive asset palette, which is like a set of assets that give you the tools that you can, in any environment, pick the best ones for branding in that environment. And that might be 4 or 5 assets of different types that then you cultivate in the long term. Now, working those things out is a bit of a challenge. You have to work out where you are, you have to measure and get them really, you've got to have a lot of inputs into it. It's not just the measurement of where you are now, but it's also thinking about how you're using these tools, which tells you what the best tools will be.
Yeah.
So that's why we do a lot of strategy around when we measure distinctive assets. There's a strategic piece around it that's really important when you do it for the first time. Because the danger I see is sometimes people run off and just think the best asset is the best future investment. And that's actually not the case. Because sometimes your best asset is your current best performing asset is something you've just left alone and actually doesn't really have that much value for you. So it might be the best of a bad lot. That doesn't mean it's worth your future investment. There's a lot more that goes into those strategic decisions.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's such an such an interesting thing in the world of marketing that like a lot of us likes to come up with new ideas, new concepts, but it's actually detrimental to what we're trying to achieve if we constantly change everything because then people don't remember us.
Well, that's why I came up with metrics for measuring distinctive assets, because there were none out there. And it was like, of course, if you don't have anything to sort of value, put numbers behind something,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
biggest, strongest opinion in the world in the room will win. And if someone goes, I think it's time for a change, no one's got any rebut other than I don't. Whereas when you got numbers, and I've been in those conversations where people have someone's wanted to change, they've got numbers. And when they look at the numbers, they go, oh, maybe we shouldn't change that.
Hmm.
Or even more importantly, even if you have to change or you don't have a choice about it, or you really want to, if you've got numbers, you understand what you're losing, and so you can compensate for it. So that stops you having that brand void that often accompanies change, whereby you're scrambling to get yourself back to where you were. You can actually preempt that and reduce that sort of time in the wilderness in between identity changes.
Yeah, that's it's super interesting. Can you like what are then kind of some of the metrics that you can actually observe about these distinct assets?
Yeah, well, the metrics we use are fame and uniqueness. So fame is the proportion of your category buyers or whatever audience you're interested in. Because if you're a B2B brand, your audience might be shareholders, it may be employees, might not just be customers. Whatever it's in, well, portion of those who, when they see the brand, see the asset without the brand is triggered. And then uniqueness, which is of all of the responses that asset gets, what share do you have versus competitors? And in both cases, we want it to be 100% fame, 100% uniqueness, because that would mean all of our audience, when they see the asset, think of our brand. And 100% uniqueness would mean they only think of our brand. They don't think of any other brands.
Mm. It makes complete sense, but I guess it's also like a big company play, as opposed to let's say no, that's good. I was just thinking, we're like a 90 people company. Could we do this as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's important. I mean, if you're a smaller company, it's even more important to be consistent, because the wastage you don't have the luxury of wastage. And interestingly enough, sometimes big companies have weak distinctive assets because they have too many people with their fingers in the pie.
Mm.
And they're constantly launching new brands, and someone's constantly doing this and that. And every time something's launched, people think, oh, we should change something. We should change this. And so they gradually erode and if they do have any historic strength, it gradually gets eroded over time. So when you've got a smaller player, they can have the discipline to go, no, we're going to stick to this. It's all about the discipline.
Emily writes something funny here. Does it matter if the distinct brand assets are ugly, or to put it in another way, does it help if they are generally agreed to be pleasing to the eye?
Why I say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I know this because I once painted a wall in my house, this sort of mustardy yellow color that I really liked. And my friend came in and said it looked like baby poo to her. So,
That's great.
I think it can often be subjective.
Yeah. If we do a little bit change of topic and then move on to kind of mental availability,
Mhm.
can you introduce that topic as well to the audience?
Yeah, so mental availability is just being the propensity of the brand to be thought of in buying situations. And there's a couple of key things in there that's important in that definition, because we spent a bit of time constructing it for a reason.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's the propensity. So it's never a given, it's only ever a chance of the brand, because it's about retrieving the brand. It's not about what is retrieved when the brand is there. That's the brand's image. And then in buying situations, because that's the key retrieval time that's the
Yeah.
best, most important. Any other time of very little value. So the propensity, the chance the brand will come to mind, will be thought of in buying situations.
Yeah, I'm just so curious, how can you kind of get that on a formula? Kind of, I know the cheat
Yeah,
code
well,
to
this
the
is the
computer.
thing, so when we measure things, we often will have ways of getting proxies for things that are not perfect, but give us an indication. So when we talk about measuring a propensity, what we're measuring is a chance something will happen, and how we work out, just like if you wanted to know, is this coin truly, it's a 50-50 chance whether I get heads or tails.
Yeah.
You don't just do 1 or 2 or 3, because you could get 3 heads in a row and you go, oh, so it's weighted heads. No, you do more than that, and then you realize in the long run it is actually 50-50.
Mm.
And if it's not, then you've got a dud coin, and you should complain about that. Same thing with propensity here. So what we do is we take a representative set of the category entry points that people in that category use to retrieve information, and we find out, how many times does our brand come up. Now that gives us an indication of basically how big it is in someone's head.
Yeah.
And that is then something that, even though they might not use the exact ones we've used, we're just getting an indication, a reflection of how big the brand is in someone's head, which we can then, when we compare it to how big other brands are in people's heads,
Yeah.
get a sense of the propensity that our brand is likely to have versus alternatives.
It's, it sounds it sounds relatively simple once you explain explain it
Yes,
like that.
once you got the key thing though is getting the right component. So if you have, and this is what took so long to come up with this is, if you have the wrong attributes going in, if you don't use category entry points, and I mean genuine category entry points, sometimes people use the term and there's some weird things they're putting in there. But yeah, my proper category entry points, you need those.
Yeah.
You need a representative set of brands. So if you just choose a set and you don't include the big brands, you're not going to get a good reading on the propensity. But you don't need to include every brand. You include the big brands, the medium brands, and a representative set of small brands. Then you get a sense of where you're sitting, even if you can't get every single brand in there.
Yeah.
And then you've got to measure it by giving people the best opportunity. So if you measure it unprompted, you are biasing it to big brands and big brands buyers talking about the brands they use. You don't give everybody an equal chance or the best chance possible of sharing with you what's in their brain. So it needs to be prompted in order to get that sense. You need to provide the brand names to people because people are very happy ignoring brands that they know nothing about or that sort of stuff. They're very happy not doing that. But if you don't provide the brands through there, non-users and small brands get neglected. And these are the ones that are important for your competition and your growth.
And are there any distinctions here to make between whether you're like a consumer-facing brand or you're like a B2B brand?
Nope. Nope. See, well, no, because your buyer brain is the same. This is actually about how we process information and how we get information out. And we don't take a different brain to work.
No.
It's still the same. The same brain we're buying pizza at night is the brain that we're deciding what coffee to buy for the staff coffee machine.
Yeah. That makes sense. Jenni, if people buy into let's say the individual theories that Ehrenberg Bass puts out, kind of, if you then have to zoom out and diagnose companies, or can we come up with some kind of recipes for people to figure out which parts of my marketing needs to be improved, or where should I double down, or where do we have a problem? Is that something you guys do as well, or you have some kind of work done on?
Yeah, I mean, we do. So we work with individual companies. We have a couple of different ways we do things. So we have our sponsorship program that companies subscribe to, and that basically gives them access to a wide range of historical information. And we're talking over 200 reports plus thousands of pieces about everything you could possibly imagine that we did, all the things that we put out there. But importantly, it gives you access to the brain's trust of the people who are actually doing the research. So if you have a question that's about things that are work in progress, they can share it too. And then you get access to seminars as well.
Yeah.
And then we work with companies on specific pieces of research. So, for example, if you want to measure your distinctive assets and understand how to plot that strategic path forward, we do that. If you want to understand, identify your category entry points and want to know how to use that, what you can use from a company perspective for your own use, but also how to track that going forward so that you've got good measurement systems for not just you, but to assess competitor activity as well. We do that. So all of the things we produce research on, we work with companies on.
Okay.
But my advice would be for anyone who's going, look, I really want to deep dive into my own brand. That's where the How Brands Grow for Executives program is. That's what it was developed for someone to be able to go along and really get a deep dive into all of the pieces of the puzzle over 4 days. And so that then allows you to think about your own brand and where are you really stuffing up right now, or are not fully capitalizing on in both mental and physical availability.
Yeah,
because it takes you through those different elements.
Yeah, I'm thinking, is there some kind of if is there some kind of like checklist all of us who have a brand we need to kind of go through?
And it's hard to do. It's hard to say that. I mean, there's the three facets of mental availability and the three facets of physical availability, and you
Yeah.
can go through each of those.
What
So
are those, just to measure?
availability, the three of those are reach, branding, and that includes your distinctive assets, but it's branding quality in general of your communications and your category entry points, having relevant messages out there. And then on physical availability, it's your presence. Are you where buying happens or could happen? Your prominence, do you stand out in those environments and are you easily found? And your portfolio, do you have things that are relevant for buyers and you're not over investing in areas that are small and under investing in areas that are growing? And so each of those kind of marry together in terms of understanding how your brand works, but each of those requires searching into specific information. So, for example, for your portfolio, understanding the contribution, understanding why each piece is there, not understanding when new brands are needed and when innovation is important, but not just launching something for the sake of launching it. Doing that mindfully. So, there's a whole heap of things that have to go into it's. I'm hesitant to call it a checklist.
Yeah.
Use a checklist to understand where you might have the best opportunity to improve, but then there's usually a research piece that has to go underpin that to know what the real problem is and how to then improve it.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, that's very much like the How Brands Grow book, right? That takes you through these things. So people can buy or listen to that book somewhere and
Absolutely, yep.
give it
Well,
quickly.
particularly How Brands Grow too, because that's where we really expanded
Yeah.
on these different elements and looked at a few situations like new brands, luxury brands, B2B brands, that don't get a lot of attention in sort of mainstream marketing texts.
Cool. Now, Jonas is asking a good question here that I'm going to try to read out for you. How do you feel about target setting for brand health metrics once you've identified which measures to impact? Most businesses work in annual cycles for budgeting, which often calls for annual perspectives on sales and marketing targets. Brand health is a long-term game, but target setting and budgeting, etc., is a short-term operation, and these ends need to meet somehow. Hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, no. So what I'd say is that first of all, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to understand what moves our metrics. So we do stuff. So remember I talked about my research is about how the stuff in people's heads influences the choices they make and how marketing activity influences the stuff in people's heads. Well, brand health tracking brings those two together because you have to understand what your marketing activity is trying to do into people's heads to measure it, to know if you've put the brand in the best position to take it forward and be bought. Now, there's not a perfect relationship between that because you've got physical availability in the way. But if you have good brand health metrics, you're able to determine that your marketing activity has given your brand the best chance. And what you don't do is kill an ad campaign or a particular activity because it didn't generate sales when it actually wasn't the activity's fault. It was, a supply chain issue or you were lost distribution or something like that. Then we need to understand who we're influencing and how. And this is where some of the subtleties get lost and the complaints about brand health tracking come in. So one of the most common complaints I get is it doesn't move. Yeah, it's kinds of thing. And that's often because either A, there's a disconnect between what you're doing and what you're measuring. And I'm just talking to a company about that recently,
that makes
where
sense.
they had all their brand health tracking laid out. And I said, so where's the link to like your advertising? And no, that was tracked somewhere else. And I'm like, but why do you think these memories would change if it wasn't through your advertising and your other marketing activities? Because That's what changes them. And if you don't have that plugged into here, how will you know what metrics should change? But then there's who as well, because the effect that marketing has on a current buyer is different to what it has on a non-buyer or a very light buyer.
It's I think it's a good question from Jonas, because I think a lot of people have this fight between we need to deliver short-term impact, but we also know that the value of our marketing and branding efforts are not just determined in the present month, but grows
Yeah.
over time.
But you can actually, if you have the right style of tracker, you can see the short-term impact in people's brains that might not play out because they're not in the buying cycle right now.
That's
But
true.
you can be confident what you've done have an effect. And so that's where aligning your tracking with your marketing activity and actually understanding what each of the metrics are for and under what conditions could they move, because there are two things you want to know. One is that, well, more than two, but two particular things. One is that I did, I sent out this email alert because I want to build up this association. So you would want to know that the people who received that actually did build up that association. But importantly, you want to know if I sent out that email alert and it didn't build that association, then I have to rethink what I'm doing with my email alert because that's not working. So unless you really know what you should have had, the absence of it is impossible to detect, and the absence of an effect means that you're not something's not working and you need to fix that. So
Yeah.
we not need to know when things move. We also need to know when they should have moved but didn't.
Yeah, it's it's such an interesting topic. I think one of the best ways I've heard it expressed is that unless you invest in growing your brand, you pay a tax on all other go-to-market activities that you do. Meaning that, so for example, I get a lot of outbound calls. If I pick up the phone, I hear a brand I've never heard about, I immediately hang up. So the effectiveness of all those BDRs out there trying to book meetings with me goes down because no one invested in like building like some kind of recall.
And exactly. So this was the question, same thing. So you're doing that to a phone call. Wouldn't you do that also to the same if you searched in Google and a whole heap of names that you didn't know came up? You'd be like,
Mm,
oh, that one I know. I've heard of them. I'll go look at them.
yeah,
That's why we can't just rely on either search or now generative AI to be the conduit that communicates our brand. We've got to work on the brain before that.
we're getting a lot of questions here, Jenny. So I'll try to get all of them before the hour is up. So Vessel is asking, does physical availability also work when you have an all online product, for example, software?
Yeah, so if it makes you feel better, you can call it purchase availability. I mean, we meant physical in the sense that even for an online product, you have to physically act to buy it. You have to click on something to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the result. There's a physical action. We can't yet do the Vulcan mind meld and just buy things with our brains. When we can, maybe there's a different thing. But right now, yes. So if it makes you feel better in the SaaS software world, just think of it as purchase availability.
Yeah, like do you show up on Google? Do you show up on social media, etc., right?
Do
Yeah.
you show up in people's brains? Yeah. So all of that.
And then Stefan is asking here, is it too simplistic to think that I should try to use communication to create association that will make people think of my brand when I enter the market? In other words, to claim category entry points for your brand.
It's too simplistic. Well, it's you'll never own a category entry point. Or put it this way, you'll never own a category entry point that has enough scale to make it worthwhile. We've done lots of research on this, including in B2B markets sort of thing. But category entry points that people use more often, they usually have more brands attached to them. You can't avoid mental competition. You just got to be better at it. So don't think about claiming it as like, what can I own? You do want to own distinctive assets, but for category entry points, think about what matters to my customers. And that's where I want to make sure that I have competitive, fresh links for those CEPs. And there are some smart ways to choose category entry points to message, because typically in most categories there are way more than you can possibly ever message. And so having a think about knowing what other people are known for and avoiding those, there are some steps you can take to make smarter choices with what you message.
Wonderful. Jenny, I want to ask you something I think which is on a lot of us marketers' mind, which is kind of how is AI gonna influence kind of the presence and the future of marketing? And if we start initially, kind of what are the first kind of changes that comes to mind, and what are the things that you don't expect to change a whole lot from AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, and it's a hard one to answer because it's such a fast moving field, and so is the danger of every any type of extrapolation being like milk.
Yeah.
It's going to expire and smell in a couple of weeks because someone's come out with something else.
Yeah, I won't hold you scientifically accountable for what you're
Well,
gonna
no,
say.
because we've actually done research into generative AI and understanding what consumers and B2B do from a category entry point perspective. What are they using it for? How are they using it? And it is quite interesting to see. So if I look at the consumer side, where you can see a little bit more of a, let's say, pattern, but the sort of structure where you can see that right now it does tend to be the other sort of computing things like search and stuff is what people are using it for, that sort of information. The next sort of tranche of opportunity for generative AI is the things that we would go. So there's the things we go to computers for. So things or electronic devices for. The next tranche seems to be for information. The next tranche seems to be the people we go to for information. So this is experts, friends. So rather than me asking my friend, does my haircut look good? I might take a picture, go to my generative AI friend and say, well, what do you think? Did my hair look good? Which it will tell me it looks good because that's what they're programmed to do. And then I will feel better and move on. And then the third harder task will be the when we use things for not just information but entertainment. So things like the YouTubes and the video stuff that we get. That's going to be the sort of third tranche where it could have an operation, but it doesn't quite have that. It's not perceived to be that yet. No one's going to their generative AI for entertainment yet. Because it's hard work. You have to do the work to generate stuff, whereas people are used to more passive things like YouTube, TikTok, etc., that provide us with suggestions on what we can watch, our television, etc.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm thinking
but
so at least we can you're at least saying the physical availability changes, because that's how I'm interpreting happens in ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc. now. So you need to show up.
where people are going for information,
Yeah.
but you still have to have it in your brain. I think that the same issues you have with the reason why we still use our brain, even though we have Google to find us stuff, is because things get cluttered, things get difficult. You still don't know what it is. There's a trust element to generative AI that's still lacking. Now, I appreciate the fact that agentic stuff is moving really quickly and that might overcome that. But then I'm also thinking there's a lot of stuff we do that isn't that complicated that we don't need AI to fix. If you think about your day-to-day life, what could AI do that would improve it? So that's where some of the things that are the more difficult things, the more things where there's more tension, risk, traction, possibly there's a role there. But it's just until we have really trustworthy models, it's going to be really hard. Now, we've tried. I mean, we did a big test of it to see about ability to generate category entry points with generative AI. We couldn't even get the same model with two different researchers, totally wiped clean. So they were coming from there was no history of them in it. Putting in the same prompts, we couldn't get the same results.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like they were a little bit different. They were totally different structured things. Like, it was impossible to compare. I had this beautiful study mapped out. One of my favorite outlines. I saw exactly what we were going to do. And we couldn't even get past the pilot stage because we couldn't even get the AI to agree with itself.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're using generative AI to generate category entry points, I would be really concerned about that, because it's drawing on incomplete information. It's drawing on whatever someone has shared in the world about the product category you're dealing with. And there's a lot that goes on in our heads that we don't put down in our computing life, in our online life.
Yeah.
And that's the big gap you're missing.
And then maybe it's just to supplement you, Jenny, I think if we talk about distinct brand assets, then I think this generative AI is getting everybody to sound very similar. If they use AI to write for them, if they use AI to produce photos for them.
Every LinkedIn post, it says, "Do you want AI to rewrite this?" And I say no.
No, yeah.
I don't want AI to rewrite. What's AI going to do that is how is that going to help, basically? So no, there's this. I mean, but there's a difference between using AI as a tool to fuel your own improvement versus using it as an idea generation tool. If you're using AI as an idea generation tool, you're making yourself redundant. But if you're using AI to help you be more productive in your job, then you might have some tasks that you're no longer doing, and you might have free time and get more responsibility and things like that. But you're at least hopefully improving your work processes in there. So I think there's a difference of using AI from a process perspective than using it from an idea generation perspective.
Yeah, I
If
agree.
you're already doing that, then I think you've given up, essentially.
Yeah. Jenny, we're out of time. Thank you so much for sharing all your marketing knowledge. If people want to kind of keep following on your scientific productions and all the other work you do, where should people go and have a look?
Well, LinkedIn's probably the best bet. I'm just in the middle. I've launched I did an A to Z when Better Brand Health came out on brand health tracking. So this is another A to Z I'm doing, highlighting the many different areas and unusual areas that we've done research at the Institute where the laws of growth hold. So my post today was H for hotels. And so, there'll be some B2B stuff in there as well, but just a wide range of unusual stuff that we've done whereby we've just tested data and it's come out. So it's part of the fun stuff there. Otherwise, there's my email addresses out there. It's beauty of being at a university is it's not very difficult to find if you do want to get in contact with me directly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenny. And there's lots of comments. So if you do have the time, you can go and comment on those afterwards. Everybody, thank you so much for spending the time with me and Jenny here today. I really appreciate it. If you do like this conversation, you can also subscribe to our little show called Attributed, where you listen to podcasts. We'll very much appreciate that. But most of all, Jenny, thank you so much for your time. I really learned a lot, and I hope to stay following you.
Thank you.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.